Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Andrea Lopez Herrera, and I am the Community Development Assistant with the Prince George's County Office of Human Rights, the county's Civil and Human Rights Education and Enforcement Agency. I want to acknowledge that we are coming to you from the traditional homeland of the Piscataway and Accokeek people. We are thankful to the Indigenous people of Maryland and are grateful for being in this space today. Co-hosting with me today is Kyla Hannington, the Public Outreach and Engagement Division Manager with the Office of Human Rights. Our agency investigates complaints of civil rights discrimination. We combat human trafficking around the region. We ensure equitable access to county government resources for all people in the language of their preference. And we educate on social justice and build understanding across diverse peoples through our outreach program. Tonight, we are so excited to join the Prince George's County Memorial Library System for this Hispanic Heritage Month special event, highlighting the new book, Daughters of Latin America, with special guest Sandra Guzmán, editor of the collection, and Dahlma Llanos-Figueroa, one of the collection's contributors. Spanning time, styles, and traditions, Daughter of Latin America is a dazzling collection of essential works from 140 Latine writers, scholars, activists, and from across the world. From warrior poet Andrew Lord to novelist Edwidge Dan Cat and performer and author Elizabeth Avocado, and artist and poet Celsia Vacuna. Gathered in one magnificent volume, Daughters of Latin America collects the intergenerational voices of Latine women across time and space, capturing the power, strength, and creativity of those visionary writers, leaders, scholars, and activists, including 24 Indigenous voices. Several authors featured are translated into English for the first time: Grammy National Book Award, Cervantes, the Pulitzer Prize winners, as well as Nobel Laureate, and the new generation of literary voices among the stars of essential collections, women whose work inspires and transforms us. And now I will introduce you to our two guests. Sandra Guzmán is a pioneer and Afro-Indigenous storyteller, culture writer, literary editor, documentary filmmaker whose work reclaims and recenters narratives of people and communities alongside the margins. A multimedia storyteller, she writes, edits, translates, and produces work that illuminates and educates. Her documentary films have aired on PBS, Netflix, HBO, Hulu, and Prime. Her pieces have appeared on NBC, Gannett, USA Today, Abundan Magazine, Shondaland, CNN, and Latino Rebels. A multimedia storyteller, she writes, edits, translates, and produces works that illuminates and educates. Among her many accomplishments, Sandra is the editor of International Anthology of Latin American Women Writers, Daughters of Latin America, an international anthology of writing by Latine women, which she is a producer and an interviewer of the art film The Pieces I Am, a documentary that explores the life and the art of the legendary storyteller Toni Morrison. Sandra is a Caribbean-born Boricua raised in New Jersey, and we are absolutely thrilled to have her as our guest this evening. Also joining us today is our Dahlma Llanos-Figueroa, which also joined us in our wonderful conversation about her book, A Woman of Endurance. Dahlma Llanos-Figueroa was born in Puerto Rico and raised in New York City. She is a product of the Puerto Rican communities on the island and in the South Bronx. She attended the New York City public school system and received her academic degrees from the State University of New York at Buffalo and Queens College City, University of New York. Dahlma taught creative writing and language and literature in the New York City public school system before becoming a young adult librarian. She also taught creative writing to teenagers, adults, and senior citizens throughout New York while honing her own skills as a fiction writer and memoirist. She is the author of Daughters of the Stone, which was listed as a 2010 finalist for the Penn and Robert W. Bynum Prize and won the 16th Annual Indie Excellence Awards for Multicultural Fiction. Numerous short stories have been appeared in such places as The Bronx Memoir, project, Latina Artists and Their Muses, Breaking Ground Anthology of Puerto Rican Women Writers in New York. From 1980 to 2012, Growing Up Girl, and the book A Woman of Endurance, published in Spanish as Indomita. She resides in the Bronx with her husband, a photographer, Jonathan Lissup. Welcome, both of you, to our program.
Thank you so much for being here. That was a long introduction, but it's because our guests have so many.
They're amazing. They're amazing.
To just get it all out there. So thank you very much, and Andrea, thanks for the introduction.
No problem.
We are thrilled to have you both with us, and want to just take a moment to thank you for your time in joining the Office of Human Rights in the Prince George's County Memorial Library System, and all of our viewers today, and also for people tuning in later. Thank you. Sandra, I'm wondering if you could start us off just by giving just a little, for people who haven't had a chance to look at it yet, tell us a little bit about the book.
First of all, thank you, Andrea, for that introduction. And I've decided that I'm going to shorten my bio.
It's okay. No.
I am coming to you from the Abenaki, the land of the Abenaki, and they populated what is today New Hampshire. And I just want to acknowledge and shout out to the Abenaki people that still walk among us and to the ancestors. I am Boricua, from Borique, and this is an archipelago in the Caribbean, and it's popularly known as Puerto Rico, the colonizer's name. So I just wanted to clarify that. This book is so beautiful. Oh my God. It is a gift that I think in so many ways was an ancestral gift, and that I get to now share with the world. It no longer is mine. It now belongs to every reader that picks it up. And it is a breathtaking collection of ancestors and contemporary authors, writers, scholars, activists, women who have been writing and really speaking truth to power for centuries. And the oldest woman in the anthology is 92 years old, Elena Poniatowska. We actually thought she was going to win the Nobel Prize in literature, but it went to a man. That's cool. Maybe next year. And then the youngest is a 27-year-old Junko Ogata Aguilar, and she's an Afro-Japanese Mexican based in Veracruz. And what can I tell you that wasn't already in the introduction is that I'm really, really proud of the work that the women are doing. There is in particular something that I absolutely love, which is the lifting of and really the breaking down of the borders that exist in Latin America. When we mostly think of Latin America, we think of a Spanish-speaking region, when in fact it is one of the most multilingual, multi-ethnic, multiracial, multicultural regions in the world. So there are about 24 different languages in the anthology, all translated to English. And we're talking about Spanish, we're talking about French, Portuguese, English, and the rest are indigenous languages. And what excites me about this book is that you can open the book to the indigenous contributors and see their writing systems in the anthology. There's poetry, there's essays, there's chants, there are letters, there are novels in progress, there are plays in progress, there are prayers, and did I say speeches? It's a multi-genre collection. And the other thing I want to say before I pass the mic is that I think this anthology is so beautiful because you can open it. You don't have to read it from front to end. You can read it from back to front. But with an anthology of this scope, you can open it at any point and there's always good medicine for you. Always. You're always going to bump into a beautiful piece of work.
That's great. That is one of the things I saw in the introduction that you had, commented that way, like how one might choose to read the book and the various ways. And as I was prepping for this and reading it, I did that. I would just flip open and read and find something magical, and then flip a few more pages and read and find something. It is absolutely terrific. It's a terrific selection.
And I'm so excited to be here tonight with my sister, Dahlma Llanos-Figueroa from our motherland, Borique. It's an honor to be with her in conversation and for her to also have her in this anthology. I think she's one of the writers that every Puerto Rican and every American should read. She's got things to say. Beautiful, powerful things to say.
I was wondering, maybe Dahlma, you can tell us, how did you hear about the collection, the opportunity? Did Sandra reach out to you? Did you hear a call for submissions? How did you come together?
That was actually amazing. We happen to know a lot of people in common. And I was told, I don't remember who it was who gave me the first news about this. I knew that there was a Daughters of Africa and a second Daughters of Africa and all kinds of, there are 4 different anthologies. And when Sandra invited me to join them, I thought, well, I kind of missed the first 3, but that's okay because this is where I belong. I feel like the universe guided me to where I needed to be. And as we spoke, I saw that we have a lot in common. The respect for the ancestors is number 1. I feel that in general, ancestors of people of color, and let me just say ancestors in general, because ancestors of European poor folks, and rural folks had the same issues of not being heard, not being included in the dialogue of the dominant voices. And I feel that my ancestors sacrificed for hundreds of years so that I could be here today and tell the stories that they were never allowed to tell in public and were never recognized or acknowledged. And so I feel like my narratives are a mission to fill in a void that was purposely created. Not because our ancestors weren't telling stories, they obviously were, and they continue to tell them. And we just took them from the oral tradition and put them on the page so that we could share it with people of Andrea's generation and younger people who need to know where they came from so they know where they are, why they are where they are, and they can plan for where they want to go. And so for me, it was more than just submitting a piece. It was submitting a very important part of myself and of my ancestors.
I know, Andrea, I'm going to put you on the spot actually for a moment, because Andrea and I were talking about your piece that was included. Dahlma, Andrea, do you want to talk to Dahlma about that? Because it's very symmetrical.
Yeah, so I'm really glad that you mentioned it like that, because when I read your piece, I was honestly amazed and very intrigued on what you had mentioned. And I was wondering if that's a story that is connected directly to your roots, or is that a story that's been passed down, or how did you come about writing that piece? Because it was just so wonderfully worded, and it just made me, it was just really thought-provoking for me.
Oh, thank you. When I started doing research for my books, I found I'm a former librarian and English teacher, so I know all about primary sources in research. But when I went to look for the research, it was all written by the colonizers, the dominant people. And that's not the story I wanted to tell. That story's been told already. I wanted to tell the story from the perspective of the enslaved people. And so what I did was I took what I considered to be as factual a foundation as I could find.
Mm-hmm.
And then I put myself in the character's position. I wanted to give flesh and bones to this kind of shadow of a character that we're told about existed in history, but we're never told who she was, what she felt, how she lived. And so I put myself in her place to see what she would feel like and how she would react to what was happening around her. I have to tell you, I ended up at one point in the hospital because I got so much into who this character must have been and what she was feeling that when I stopped typing, I got up and started throwing up. And eventually my husband had to take me to the emergency room. It felt like I was throwing up all the pain and all the anger and torture and terror of being an enslaved African woman. And it was okay, because if that's the cost I had to pay to tell the story, then it's okay. Then it's worth the experience.
Right. Wow. Thank you so much for that. Definitely. I think there was one part in your piece where it's like she has no hope. Like the last faith that she has is like her secret and what she believes in. And I was just like, wow, like that. Sometimes when we get to our lowest points in life, that's the last things that we have is like what we believe in and how are we gonna keep going through. So it was just a great piece. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, thank you so much. That's important because I wrote it for you and for other people like you who may never have thought about it,
Right.
and this gives you an opportunity to take a look at what that must have been like.
Right. Thank you so much.
I actually loved the submission. This wasn't an open call, by the way, Kyla.
Yeah, that's what. Okay.
Yeah, this was I made the anthology was inspired by the ancestor anthology, New Daughters of Africa. And Margaret Busby, who edited New Daughters of Africa, did such a spectacular job. The book is about 900 pages long, and there's 210 daughters from the African diaspora. And so I got 500 pages, and I wanted to include 210 daughters of Latin America, but I was able to squeeze in 140. And I'm really excited for people to delve into the works of all these women. But I want to say that when I asked Dahlma, I'm a fan of Dahlma. We have friends in common, but I've been a fan of Dahlma since the first book that I read of hers is Daughters of the Stone. And being an Afro Boricua, having ancestors who were enslaved, having a father who worked in a sugar plantation when he was 5 years old in the southern coast of Puerto Rico, and having an ancestor who is a runaway enslaved woman, this work really spoke to the most visceral parts of my soul. Because now for the first time, I get to read about the women in my lineage and how strong they are and how powerful they are and how beautiful they are and what they survived so that, as Dahlma said, we could be here today. So she made the selection, the chapter of Indomita, and I thought it was beautiful. And Andrea, you were intrigued and you want to read more because she chose very wisely despite the excerpt, so that you want to say, but what happened to Paula? Like what this woman, is taken on a ship and she has no idea where she's going. She's stolen. And she ends up in, this other place. And I thought it was really brilliant that you chose that specific part. So
Thank you.
As Andrea has shared with us, she's intrigued. She wants to know.
I want to ask a question related to the ancestors, and Dahlma's piece is in the ancestral moon piece. And so I want to talk about that, but I think before we get there, can you talk about how the book is ordered and structured?
Yes. So the book is divided into 13 sections and honoring the 13 holy moons of the year. And the number 13 to the Maya people, for instance, is a holy number. And the name of it is another word for God. And so when I started to think about, first of all, I want to say that I have been, for the past, since 2014, I have been in what is called a rematriation process. I came to this country, I immigrated, and I use that word intentionally, immigrated, not migrated, because I believe that Borique, Puerto Rico, is a nation under occupation since 1898 by the US and since 1493 by Spain and its royal crown. And so when I immigrated to the United States at the age of 9 years old, I came, supposedly we were coming on vacation for 3 months to New York, but we ended up in New Jersey, which is not as, well, the loveliest thing about New Jersey and Jersey City was the view of the New York City skyline. But what I want to say, you talked about, why 13 and why I chose to divide it in this way. I am in the process of rematriating to Borique again, and I met an indigenous man from Vieque, which is the smaller island. Puerto Rico is made up of it's an archipelago like Hawaii. So there's about 143 plus little islands, small islets. So it's huge. And people paint it as a small, 100 by 35, but it's really vast in the Caribbean. And so anyway, so this indigenous man, this Taino brother tells me, so you're coming back home? And I said, yes. And he says, do you know the language of the moon? And I was stumped. I was like, the language of the moon? In immigration, we have lost all of these stories, all of these connections to the natural world, and so the moon is our abuela, is our it's our everything, and she informs so much of what we do. Right? She's pulling at us, she's giving us energy, and she's so connected to women that I thought the moon would be really an amazing way to look at this book. And then 13, this holy number, most humans, men have 12 orifices, 12, holes, and then women have 13. And the 13th orifice is the womb. So we're like perfect beings in that sense. And then, I was in conversation with a Maya elder, excuse all the pingings. But I was in conversation when I was thinking about, how I was going to divide the anthology, in conversation with a Maya timekeeper. And I mentioned her in the anthology. So she can potentially be the 141st daughter, right? And I was asking her about their calendar. One of their calendars, they're like ancient astronomers and astrophysicists. And they... one of their calendars has been in use for 26,000 years. It clocks 26,000 years. And so there's usually one person in the Maya community that's a timekeeper. Could you imagine like somebody who's keeping the time, like when to harvest, when to fish, when to plant, when to get pregnant, or like things like that, or when to have games, when to celebrate, what to celebrate. So they have been keeping time forever. And so I started talking to her about their calendar, and she was the one who explained to me that they divide their days into 13-day weeks. And so 13-day weeks.
Oh, I'm interested by that.
And then each day of the week has a specific energy. And these are celestial energies that are coming to you. A lot of us, because of colonization all over Earth, we're disconnected from these stories, from these stories of the ancients everywhere. All Earthlings have ancestors, and some of them are connected to their stories more closely and to the earth more closely than others. And so she started to explain to me the different energies of each day. And the one day, I think today is last week, This might be like day number 9 in the Maya calendar. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm off for a couple of days, but each of the days has its specific energy. So as I began to really meditate on how I wanted to enter this space of grouping the women, I thought, why not group them to an energy of the moon? And of course, Dahlma had to be in the ancestral moon. Come on, right? Come on, Dahlma.
I am very glad to be in the ancestral moon, because one of my characters is Yemaya, and she is connected. She is the goddess of the ocean, and she is connected to the moon and the tides. And I had no idea that Sandra was using this type of categorization, but it worked out just fine.
It was perfect.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear.
So, Andrea, I don't want to keep telling. I don't want to be a question hog.
Okay. So my question is so can we talk about the word Latine? So Sandra, you point out in the introduction of Daughters of Latin America, it's the first time that Latine is used in the cover of a book. So can we dive into that a little bit more, and where originates? Why did you decide to use it in the book, and so what?
Okay. Well, first of all, it's pronounced Latine.
Okay.
It's a hard A.
Thank you.
A hard A.
Latine.
And I actually debated whether or not I should put the accent on it so that people will understand that it's not a silent E.
Okay.
So it's Latine. And this is a term that's been around for about 10 years. And it was, as you know, in Spanish, it's masculine and feminine, Latina, Latino. And in this book, there are non-binary contributors.
Right.
So I needed to make sure that the non-binary contributors in this anthology and in our world and in our community were being represented with a word that made sense to them. And so that was one of the reasons. Latine is a word that academics and queer communities in Latin America and in the US started to coin because the Latinx did not feel very authentic to their experience. You know, X is not really a word that we use in Spanish language. And so that word started to become and is becoming more popular. And this is an international anthology. So I had to also keep in mind how others, writings by Latinx women would not really, I think, connect with women in Latin America, because Latinx is something that comes out of the United States.
Right.
Hispanic, forget about it. Those never going to be on the cover.
Right.
And even like, I really am happy that you asked that question, because there has been some confusion in some, circles of people that are not familiar with the word. So that's the reason why I chose to go with Latine.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Great question.
So we have many questions, because it was like one of the things, and this is for people who are watching who haven't had the chance to get it. So first of all, let me just say, actually, I'm going to do a commercial right now. We're going to take a midway commercial for people who have not had the opportunity to get this book yet. It really is completely fantastic. And so I would normally do this at the end, but I'm going to do it right now. One of the best ways that you can support writers is to get their book. And you can go to your favorite independent bookstore and you can get this. And if they don't have it, you can ask for them to get it. And if you're not in a position to purchase the book, and not everybody is, we understand that, you can also get it out from the library. And so go to pgcmls.info, order it, request it, put a hold on it. This book is absolutely wonderful. So one of the pieces that I loved in this was Celeste Mohammed's piece, which it's Sundar Larky.
Yes.
I hope I'm saying that correctly.
Yes.
And it was just fantastic. And also I was reading about all the things. So I read for the Firecracker Awards when the year that she won. And then I've also been, I've applied to a lot of the same contest that she won. They didn't return my calls, strangely. And then when I read her piece, I was like, this is why they're not returning your calls, because what she did is so amazing. So I love that piece. And so, I mean, we can certainly talk about what my question, which I'm getting to, is what are the standouts? And I mean, I know it's all great. I'm not trying to make you pick your favorite daughter, but I do want to know, like, what are some highlights for each of you? I'd love to hear from both of you what things that just really, today are still resonating for you.
I want to quickly say that Celeste is from Trinidad. And remember that at the beginning, I said that this collection is porous. It breaks down boundaries. It goes through boundaries, these imperialistic boundaries that seek to separate us, right? Carmen Bojosa, who's a poet from Mexico, a poet, essayist, playwright, novelist, she said a couple of weeks ago, she said, Sandra, what you created with this anthology is a borderless country, a new country. And so I love Celeste's writing because it's very indigenous to Trinidad. And so if you hear her read, it is like a beautiful song from that beautiful Caribbean island. I don't have a favorite daughter. They're all my favorite daughters. And they're all my favorite daughters for many, many reasons. Because these are women who some of them have been jailed because of their writings. Some of them have been killed because of their writings. Some of them have been lived in the closet because they lived in autocratic and homophobic cultures and communities. And so I love them all with equal passion. I want to talk about, because we're with a very special daughter tonight, I want to talk about Dahlma. And I want to talk about Dahlma's work, because Dahlma's work centers women who have been marginalized in the hemisphere since they were brought in chains to the continent. And I'm particularly interested in what moves her, and also does Paula still come to visit you as she to visit me? Paula is the protagonist of her second novel, Woman of Endurance.
So you're asking me, okay. Well, I think that until recently, certainly no more than 10 years ago, when you heard the word Latina, there are lots of images that came to mind based on the dominant dialogue. None of them were Black women. And I grew up watching television where Latinas, first of all, it was all stereotypical, right? So the women were always olive-skinned, either hypersexual or totally submissive, or they certainly weren't like anyone I knew. And as I got older and went through the educational system, I got angrier and angrier because there were African women in every country of the Americas had slavery and had African women, and our voices were not heard, our images were not projected, and it angered me because the more I read and the more traditional education I acquired, the more absent I was from the narrative. And I decided that this has got to change, especially when I went into the classroom and here was a whole new generation of children who had no place, no voice, who had been silenced. And so I started writing about the African descendancy, the diaspora of Africanness in Puerto Rico in particular, because that's what I know, that's where my roots are. But also as I traveled, I'm getting on the subway and on the train in Rome, and there are Black women on that train. There are Blacks in the Russia. There are, so I saw for the first time that the education that I had gotten had been extremely limited and presented not just a bad picture of me, but I was erased and my voice was silenced. And so I decided that had to change. I try to avoid generalities. So you will find in Women of Endurance that that Black women are not the noble savage, right? So there are women that they are human. So there are women who are collaborators. There are women who are proud of their race. There are women who are not. There are Black albinos. There are Black protectors. There are Black traders. I want to eliminate this notion of our humanity being erased. And if you're going to be human, then you have to have all of those traits, positive and negative. And I think that's what makes great literature. And I think that's why a Scandinavian descendant woman in Wisconsin can read my work and identify with it, because hey, my grandmother came in a covered wagon and she was treated the same way. And or my indigenous great grandmother had to go through this as well. So I think if we're going to talk about meaningful literature, we have to talk about creating characters that are human and that go across national and cultural lines. So that although I am writing about Puerto Rico, I'm also writing about African women in Brazil and in Ecuador and in Argentina and in Haiti and in Jamaica. So I think we have to start looking at the commonalities. This society is very good about separating us. We have got to, in response, build bridges and look for those things that unite us, because we're much stronger united than we are separate. That's my big speech.
Thank you, Dahlma. Thank you. And I want to point out that there's 4 groups that I wanted to lift, 4 groups of women that I was thinking about as I was curating the anthology. And one of the groups is are Indigenous women who are still writing in their ancient mother tongues. Another group of women are Afro-Latinas. In fact, I don't know if you're familiar, Dahlma, with the work of Virginia Brindis de Salas, the first Black Latina published in Uruguay in the 1940s. And there are many, many Afro-Latinas in the anthology. Another group I wanted to lift were the queer women. As I said before, queer women have been through it and are still going through it in parts of the hemisphere. And then the last group of women that I wanted to center were Puerto Rican women, because of our colonial status. When anthologies are created in the United States, in the canon, usually Puerto Rican women are left out. And then when anthologies are created in Latin America, because of our colonial status, oh, you guys belong to the United States, then we're left out of the Latin American conversation. And I felt it was really important to lift these 4 voices of women who are erased, marginalized, and not centered. In this book, they are the stars.
That was I had thought that I had mentioned that there's a move away from the white male Eurocentric gaze, and you have this part in the introduction where you say the book that you are holding is in the tradition of the matriarchy, women who are invested in dismantling the very monstrous system, the patriarchy that oppresses. And so, I mean, you've got right where one of the places I wanted to be, which is just looking at dismantling these systems through the literary arts. And, we know Dahlma, and I again, for those of you watching, if you have not yet read Dahlma's book, A Woman of Endurance, it is another one that I need you to run and go get. It's absolutely amazing. And I'm going to quote Dahlma if I can. There's parts in the book that are difficult. And it's Dahlma said to me last year, trust that she is holding you in her hands all the way through. And it's just incredible. So I really encourage you to go get that or take it out from your local library. I do want to talk about this continued maybe a little bit deeper in this, like how we dismantle these oppressive systems through the arts. And I think both of your work, this collection and your work, Dahlma, are doing that.
Dahlma, as an elder, I defer to you.
Well, yes. The first, I'd like to speak to that issue of our work being difficult because it references painful and really hurtful experiences over centuries. I especially want to talk about that in view of the fact that so many people are hell-bent on banning truth and hiding, as they say in Spanish, hiding the sun with their hands, right? You cannot deny truth and move forward. You can only stifle growth if you do that. But so I needed to open the door and look at the world from a woman's perspective. And that only happened in European and American literature recently in our history, where the women's movement really wrestled that power away from the men, which is still there. And it's not that we don't need the male gaze, because we are, again, a collection of people, both male and female. However, the women's voices need to be heard because they've been silenced for way too long. And there are too many stories that haven't been told. So if you look at any given area, if you look at, for instance, World War II, how many novels, how many stories, how many history books do we have about World War II? And rightfully so, except we also had a North African devastation of people who were just trampled on. Their land was taken. All of Africa was divided and like a pie, given to different people without regard to the sanctity of the people who were there. And until we look at that, and Daughters of the Stone is all about the major symbol in Daughters of the Stone is the scar. You have a scar, you have a wound, and you try and cover it up without looking at healing it, and the entire body will fester, which is what has happened historically in the United States. The more you say there was no Holocaust of the natives, there were no Holocaust of the Jews, there were no Holocaust, the more you deny, the more that festers, the angrier people get, and there will be no healing. In order for us to thrive as a society, we've got to look at truth in the face, listen to it, whether it's hard or not, and then think of, okay, that's where we were then. What are we going to do about it now? How do we proceed? So I hope that my work is a balm, a healing mechanism for discussing the problems that we have and moving on from there, because denying it is never going to work. And so, yes, to my readers, I say, I present you with all the pain, with all the heartache, with all the problems, but I do hold you in my hand. I won't drop you. And my books are not about defeat. My books are about endurance and strength and moving on. And until we look at the pain, we can't look at the healing. And so my books always end with a kind of healing. Not a Hollywood ending. We're not there. But we're taking steps towards healing. Again, a long-winded. Don't let me start talking because it's a good thing I'm a writer. Let's put it that way.
I wanna say that when I hear you talking about looking at history, I'm reminded of Toni Morrison, one of my greatest teachers and literary mentors. And for those of you who haven't seen The Pieces I Am, which is a documentary that I helped produce as a result of reading her entire body of work in chronological order over a 2-year period. Please watch it. But she said about history and the terror of slavery that she said you have to look at it with clear eyes. You have to look at it with clear eyes, even if it hurts, because you need to know what happened. And so we need to know what happened. And in this book, talking about the matriarchy and answering your question, Kyla, about the matriarchy, I come from a long line of matriarchs, right? So my mother was a grand matriarch. My grandmothers were grand matriarchs. My great grandmothers were grand matriarchs. And in this matriarchy, the women are in charge of the community and of the children and of culture. In fact, we are the ones, the elders are the ones who decide who the male leader is going to be. You know, and so what I notice about the writing and all of these women who are in this book is that they come from a lineage of the matriarchy. They understand the power of the woman, and they know that when the woman is in charge, the world and their communities and their families are in a better place. We don't like to make war. We like to make peace. We want our children to be safe, right? So there's a section in the book, in my introduction, where I talk about my mother coming to me. My mother's on the ancestral plane, but she comes to visit me as all our ancestors and talks to me in the dreams. And she told me, and it's a really beautiful section, and we don't have any time to read it, but I encourage people to read it, where she says that a lot of feminists today are performing feminism, and the true way to women's liberation is through the matriarchy. And so I believe in my mother, and I believe in the matriarchs, and I believe that when women are in charge, I think that we live in a better world, in a safer world.
Thank you both so much. I do want to Andrea, I'm gonna hand it over to you in just a moment. I do want to just let people who are watching know that we'd love to hear from you. If you have questions or comments, please type them in the chat. And before I turn it over to you, Andrea, we'll say we have heard from one of our very faithful viewers, a big fan of the libraries, and comes to a lot of our events with between the library and our office, Miss Vivian, who, first of all, it's her birthday today, so happy birthday to Miss Vivian. And she said a couple of things. So first of all, she really likes your earrings, and I want to make sure that you know that has been said. But she's also brought a question forward about if you enjoyed, she uses the word writing, but if you enjoyed putting the books together. Can you talk a little bit about the experience, what that was like for you?
Oh, Miss Vivian, happy birthday. These earrings were made by a Taina, an indigenous Boricua, and an elder, and she's out of Massachusetts, Newton, Massachusetts. Her name is Chali Naru, and they're my lucky earrings. Did I have fun? Oh my goodness. Let me tell you something. First of all, could you imagine reaching out to a woman like Mari Grueso Romero, who is an Afro-Colombiana out of Buenaventura, Colombia, and finding her, finally connecting with her, and then I Zoomed with as many women as I could so that they, so that they can get to know me, especially the women who didn't know me, and explain what it is that I was trying to do with this anthology. And she said to me, "Can I read some poems to you?" And I was like, "Can you read some poems?" So yeah, I had a really good time. In fact, I put together a playlist on Spotify called Daughters of Latin America. So I was listening to, in this anthology, there are also songs. And like I said, I wanted to include this anthology with 140 women is the tip of the iceberg when it comes to talent. Let me tell you, this is not the definitive number of brilliant women. There are so many incredible women, and so there were also difficult moments. This is a work of scholarship. There were times when I didn't sleep a lot. What is that? And so it was, but it was a joyful time to be in communion with all of these powerful women. It was like a party up in here by myself.
That's great. Andrea, do you have a question?
Sorry, that was the race car in the back. That was definitely someone racing. But yes, I have one last question. So, with reading this collection, I definitely learned a lot. Specifically with the story of Diana Gallardo. Gallardo. Hopefully, I'm saying that right.
Gallardo. Sara Gallardo.
I think so.
Andrea Gallardo. Do you remember the
It's called Buena Gente.
Oh yes, Adriana.
So when I was reading her story, I read about the massacre in Mexico, which I was not familiar about. So, reading that, educating myself about that was definitely a moment that I appreciated from this book. I wanted to know from you all if by reading these stories that, that were presented to you, did you all learn anything, or were you able to connect to any others? I'm pretty sure you might have, but like if you connected with one, more than others or anything like that, just because with the Buena Gente, I definitely connected a lot. She talks about her father going into retirement and how I know my parents, they definitely came a long way by the people that were in their path. So, I wanted to see if there was any connection with you all in there in that aspect.
Well, I can't pick out one or two or three,
right?
Because there are so many jewels in this necklace that I wear now when I read this book. I think what I take away more than anything is that I look at the whole time span of this, and we have women who are, Nobel Prize winners, and there are women who were never mothers, even though they wanted to be, or women who were mothers of many children, or women who were non-gender specific. I mean, there were so many different realities. And I think that, especially in the United States, we want things to be easy so we could put a label on it. Okay, this is what Latino means. Well, reading this book means that Latino or Latine is a whole world of experiences. And every single person that I know can see themselves in one part or another of the book. And that's what I love to see, the variety, the many colors of us, the many tones of us, the many songs of us. And I think that the greatest gift that we can give is to show that we are a whole world of experiences that haven't been explored yet. So thank you, Sandra, for getting us all together, for breaking time, because it doesn't matter what time we write in. We have never stopped talking. We have never stopped telling stories. We have never stopped wanting to reach out.
Oh my goodness, I'm getting goosebumps. Thank you so much, Dahlma. It's so true. It's so true. When you were talking earlier about the banning that's happening now, if you notice in the introduction, I talk about the burnings. The conquistadores burnt thousands of books when they arrived on these shores. They burnt thousands of codexes. They call them codexes. These Maya books. There's only 4 that exist right now, and they all have European names because they're in European collections. And they burnt these books made with the bark of the amatal tree, which is stronger than papyrus, because supposedly they had diabolical things, and what they had were stories and calendars, and so we have known about the bannings. The women in this book have been banned. That was another thing that was very common. There's a woman in this book. She's a 19th century Ecuadorian poet who wrote an anti-capital punishment manifesto and she was banned. She hated the fact that every other day, there were lynchings of indigenous people in what is today Ecuador. And she wrote a very powerful manifesto. And Dolores Ventimilla was 28 years old, and she was found, she allegedly committed suicide by drinking cyanide. And she had a baby that was about 2 years old. So the bannings of the truth has been a tool of the oppressor. That the women in this book and the women who continue to write across the world have survived and will continue to survive, for sure. For sure.
If I can put it in the most concise way that I can, for me, erasure, and banning is another word for erasure. Yes. Erasure equals genocide.
Yes.
And shows fear. Because if you're not afraid, you don't need to erase. You don't need to ban.
That's right. That's right. Well put. Well said.
Wow. This has been, this is the part that I don't like, which is it always comes way too soon, which is we're like right in the middle of an amazing part of the conversation that I have to say. We're getting close to being out of time. I do want to say a couple of things, though. I want to take a minute and look at this idea of erasure and banning. And as it relates to the collection, I'm going to say again, this is just a great, it's beautiful. As Sandra said, as soon as we started, it's beautiful. And actually, we're going to go over time by 2 minutes because I want to ask you a question. Can you tell us about the cover? I would love to know about the cover.
Yeah, this cover is stunning. She's another daughter of Latin America. Her name is Camila Rosa, and she's from Brazil, and she's now based in Brooklyn. And this would be, I think, the 9th or the 10th cover that was suggested by the publisher. I kept saying, no. How am I going to find a cover that encompasses all of the beauty and all of the diversity and all of the power and all of the brilliance in one image? It was very hard. And when I saw it, I love the ferocity of the way in which the women are looking at each other. I love the chocolate. I love that they're in conversation. I love that the ancestor, I see her as an ancestor, is embracing and covering the younger women. I love the colors. It's just a really beautiful, beautiful cover. And her name is Camila Rosa. Please look her up. She's doing beautiful, powerful work. A sister out of Brazil who's based in Brooklyn right now.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And what I was going to say about this is one of the ways, again, to make sure that voices are not erased, that stories are told. Get the book. Again, your favorite independent bookstore, your favorite library. If your library doesn't have it, please ask them to get it in. Read it, experience it, and carry those stories in your heart. I do also want to let people know who are watching and would like to meet with us. We are actually doing a rock band book club book group with the Prince George's County Memorial Library System, and we're looking at the 10 in quotation marks most challenged books according to the American Library Association of 2022. And the reason that's in quotation marks is because several books tied in that top 10. So we're actually looking at the 13 most challenged books. And tomorrow night, we are doing an in-person event at Oxon Hill Library. We hope you can come. We were talking about the book Lawn Boy. I realize that's short notice for some of you. So in November, we're doing The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie. And in December, if you want to plan ahead, we are doing Crank by Ellen Hopkins. And there's more. You can learn more about that by visiting pgcmls.info or visiting our website at civilrights.mypgc.us. And on Thursday, we'd like you to come and join us for another virtual event. It's a first in our Empowering the Game series. It's the lacrosse edition. We're welcoming 4 incredible women who are just pioneers and incredible advocates in sport for women of color, and for lacrosse. So all of you watching, thank you so much for joining us. And Sandra and Dahlma, we are really honored that you would take your time and be with us and share about this really extraordinary book. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time and being with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.